The snow fell gently outside the grand windows of Kensington Palace as Princess Beatrice adjusted her emerald green dress one final time. The annual Royal Christmas Charity Gala was only hours away, and despite the festive atmosphere that should have filled her heart with joy, a heavy weight pressed against her chest. She could hear the distant sounds of staff preparing the ballroom downstairs, the clinking of crystal glasses, and the soft rustle of tablecloths being arranged with military precision. Her phone buzzed on the mahogany dressing table, displaying a message from her sister Eugenie. "Ready for tonight? We need to talk before the event starts. Meet me in the blue drawing room in 20 minutes. Beatrice's stomach tightened as she read the words. The past few months had been a whirlwind of family tensions, leaked stories in the tabloids, and whispered conversations that stopped abruptly whenever she entered a room. The royal family had always been under scrutiny, but lately it felt as though every move they made was being dissected under a microscope. Their father's past controversies continued to cast long shadows over their lives, and the constant speculation about their roles within the monarchy had begun to take its toll on both sisters. Beatrice remembered the days when Christmas events were purely about celebration and giving back to the community, not strategic appearances designed to rebuild public trust. As she made her way through the familiar corridors lined with portraits of ancestors who had faced their own trials and tribulations, Beatrice couldn't help but think about how much their world had changed. The palace, once a sanctuary of tradition and stability, now felt like a stage where every performance was being judged by an invisible audience of millions. The weight of representing not just themselves, but their entire family's reputation seemed heavier with each passing day. The blue drawing room was softly lit when she arrived, its pale silk wallpaper and antique furniture creating an atmosphere of quiet elegance. Eugenie was already there, standing by the tall windows that overlooked the palace gardens. Her burgundy velvet dress complemented her auburn hair perfectly, but Beatrice could see the tension in her sister's shoulders, the way she held herself as if bracing for impact. Eugenie turned as her sister entered, her voice carrying a mixture of relief and apprehension. "I'm so glad you came early. We need to discuss how we're going to handle tonight." The two sisters had always been close, their bond strengthened by years of navigating the unique challenges that came with their royal birthright. But recent events had tested even their relationship as they struggled to find their place in an evolving monarchy. Beatrice settled into one of the velvet armchairs, her fingers automatically smoothing the fabric of her dress. "The press is going to be watching our every move tonight," she said quietly. "Mother called this morning. She's worried about how we'll be received, especially after last week's headlines." The headlines in question had been particularly brutal, questioning the relevance of the younger royals and their contributions to the crown's public image. Eugenie moved away from the window and sat across from her sister, her expression serious but determined. "That's exactly what I want to talk about. I've been thinking about this all week, and I believe we have an opportunity tonight to show everyone who we really are. Not the tabloid versions of ourselves, not the scandal-ridden princesses they want to paint us as, but the women we've become despite everything." The conversation that followed was intense and emotional. They discussed their fears about public perception, their frustration with being judged for circumstances beyond their control, and their deep desire to make a meaningful difference in the world. Both sisters had developed their own charitable interests over the years, Beatrice with her work in education and technology, Eugenie with her passion for environmental conservation and modern slavery awareness. Yet somehow, their genuine efforts often seemed overshadowed by family drama and media speculation. "Do you remember when we were children, how excited we used to get about Christmas events?" Beatrice asked, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "Everything seemed so magical then. The decorations, the music, the way people's faces would light up when we handed out presents to the children from the local charities." Eugenie nodded, a small smile crossing her face as she recalled those simpler times when their biggest worry was whether they would remember all the names of the people they were supposed to meet. "We can still create that magic," Eugenie replied firmly. "Maybe even more so now, because we understand what it's like to face adversity. We know what it feels like when people judge you before they even know you. That makes us more relatable, more human. The children and families we'll meet tonight don't care about newspaper headlines. They care about kindness, about feeling seen and valued." As if summoned by their conversation, a soft knock came at the door. Lady Catherine, one of their ladies-in-waiting, entered with a gentle smile. "Your Royal Highnesses, the first guests have begun arriving. The photographers are set up in the grand entrance, and the children from St. Margaret's Children's Home are particularly excited to meet you both." Her words served as a reminder that beyond their personal struggles, there were people who genuinely looked forward to these events, who found joy and hope in the tradition of royal Christmas celebrations. Beatrice and Eugenie exchanged a look that spoke volumes. In that moment, they made an unspoken pact to put aside their worries and focus on what truly mattered, using their platform to bring happiness to others and to demonstrate the values they had been raised with. They would face the cameras, the criticism, and the constant evaluation with grace and dignity, but more importantly, they would remember why these events existed in the first place. The sisters rose from their chairs simultaneously, their movements synchronized in the way that only comes from years of shared experiences. As they prepared to leave the quiet sanctuary of the blue drawing room, Beatrice reached for Eugenie's hand. "Whatever happens tonight, we face it together," she said, squeezing her sister's fingers gently. "Just like we always have." Eugenie squeezed back, her eyes bright with unshed tears of both anxiety and determination. "Together," she agreed. "And tomorrow, regardless of what the papers say, we'll know that we stayed true to ourselves and to the people who really needed us tonight." As they walked toward the grand staircase that would take them to the main reception, the sound of children's laughter drifted up from the ballroom below. The Christmas tree, decorated with thousands of twinkling lights and handmade ornaments contributed by various charities, stood majestically in the center of the room. The sight of it through the open doors filled both sisters with a renewed sense of purpose. Tonight would be about more than managing family tensions or rehabilitating their public image. It would be about remembering who they were beneath the titles and the scrutiny. Two young women who had been given extraordinary privileges and who were determined to use those privileges to make the world a little brighter, one Christmas celebration at a time. The first guests they would greet were already visible in the entrance hall below, their faces upturned with anticipation and excitement. Among them were children who had been looking forward to this night for months, elderly people from local care homes who rarely had the chance to attend such grand events, and families who had been supported by the various charities the royal family championed throughout the year. As Beatrice and Eugenie descended the staircase together, their footsteps echoing softly on the marble steps, they carried with them not just the weight of expectation, but also the power of possibility. Tonight, they would have the chance to create moments of joy that would last in people's memories long after the headlines faded. Tonight, they would remind themselves and others why traditions like this mattered, and why sometimes the most important battles are won not with grand gestures, but with simple acts of genuine human connection. The grand ballroom of Kensington Palace had been transformed into a winter wonderland that took everyone's breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across walls adorned with garlands of fresh pine and holly, while hundreds of candles created a warm, golden glow that made every face appear touched by magic. The enormous Christmas tree dominated the center of the space, its branches heavy with ornaments that told stories of hope, creativity, and community spirit. As Beatrice and Eugenie entered the ballroom, a hush fell over the assembled crowd before erupting into warm applause. The sisters moved with practiced grace, but there was something different about them tonight. Perhaps it was the way they held their heads high, or the genuine smiles that reached their eyes, but Everyone in attendance could sense that these were not merely royal figures performing their duties. These were two women who had chosen to be fully present in this moment. Their first stop was a group of children from St. Margaret's Children's Home, ranging in age from 5 to 15. 8-year-old Sophie, wearing a carefully pressed dress that was clearly her finest outfit, had been chosen to present the sisters with a handmade Christmas card. Her small hands trembled slightly as she approached, but when Eugenie knelt down to her level and asked about the beautiful drawing on the front of the card, Sophie's nervousness melted away. "I drew you and Princess Beatrice as Christmas angels," Sophie explained, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Because my teacher said that angels help people when they're sad or scared, and you help lots of people." The innocence and sincerity in her words struck both sisters deeply. Here was a child who had faced her own challenges in life, yet she saw them as sources of comfort and protection rather than subjects of gossip and controversy. Beatrice felt her throat tighten with emotion as she looked at the drawing. In Sophie's imagination, she and Eugenie weren't princesses burdened by scandal or public criticism. They were simply caring figures who could make difficult things better. "Sophie, this is the most beautiful Christmas card I've ever received," Beatrice said, her voice soft but carrying clearly in the nearby silence. "Would you mind if we displayed it somewhere special so everyone can see how talented you are?" The interaction set the tone for the evening. As the sisters moved through the room, stopping to chat with elderly residents from local care facilities, families supported by various charities, and volunteers who dedicated their time to helping others, something remarkable began to happen. The formal atmosphere that usually characterized royal events began to dissolve, replaced by something far more authentic and meaningful. Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, an 83-year-old woman from Sunshine Manor Care Home, captured the attention of both sisters when she quietly mentioned that this was her first Christmas event since losing her husband of 60 years. "Harold always said I should wear the pearl necklace he gave me on special occasions," she said, touching the modest but elegant strand around her neck. "I almost didn't come tonight, but the other residents convinced me that he would have wanted me to be here." Eugenie sat down beside Mrs. Hartwell, taking her weathered hands in her own. "Tell me about Harold," she said simply. For the next 20 minutes, while photographers discreetly captured the moment and other guests continued their conversations, Mrs. Hartwell shared stories of her late husband's kindness, his service during difficult times, and their shared love of Christmas traditions. The elderly woman's face transformed as she spoke, grief giving way to joy as she remembered the beautiful life they had built together. Meanwhile, Beatrice found herself in deep conversation with Marcus Chun, a 16-year-old who had aged out of the foster care system, but was working with a charity that helped young people transition to independence. Marcus had been hesitant to attend, feeling out of place among the elegant surroundings, but Beatrice's genuine interest in his story and his dreams for the future helped him open up about his experiences and aspirations. "I want to study engineering," Marcus confided, "but sometimes it feels impossible. I'm working 2 part-time jobs just to afford a tiny flat, and university seems like something for other people." Beatrice listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions about his interests and the specific challenges he faced. When he mentioned his fascination with renewable energy technology, her eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "That's exactly the kind of innovation our world needs," she told him earnestly. "And I happen to know several programs that provide support for students in situations like yours. Would you mind if I connected you with some people who could help?" The genuine surprise and gratitude on Marcus's face reminded Beatrice of why these personal connections mattered so much more than any photograph or headline ever could. As the evening progressed, both sisters found themselves energized by the stories they were hearing and the connections they were making. They met a single mother who had started a successful catering business after escaping an abusive relationship, a group of teenagers who were using art therapy to process trauma, and a retired teacher who had created a reading program for homeless individuals. Each conversation revealed layers of human resilience, creativity, and hope that existed far beyond the palace walls. The formal dinner portion of the evening presented its own opportunities for meaningful interaction. Rather than the usual arrangement where royals sat at a head table separated from their guests, Beatrice and Eugenie had requested that they be seated among the attendees. Beatrice found herself at a table with families who had been supported by a literacy program she championed, while Eugenie sat with environmental advocates and young entrepreneurs working on sustainability projects. During the meal, conversation flowed naturally. Children shared their favorite Christmas traditions, elderly guests offered wisdom gained from decades of experience, and young adults spoke passionately about their hopes for the future. The sisters participated not as distant royal figures offering obligatory pleasantries, but as engaged individuals who were genuinely interested in learning from the people around them. The evening's entertainment featured performances by various groups that the royal charity supported. A children's choir from an inner-city school filled the ballroom with their angelic voices, singing traditional carols with arrangements they had created themselves. A dance troupe composed of young people from refugee backgrounds performed pieces that blended their cultural heritage with contemporary British influences. Each performance was met with enthusiastic applause and genuine appreciation from the royal sisters. But perhaps the most moving moment of the evening came when 10-year-old James, who had been born with a severe speech impediment and had worked for months with a therapy program supported by one of Eugenie's charities, stood up to recite a poem he had written about Christmas hope. His words came slowly and carefully, but every person in the room listened in respectful silence, understanding the courage it took for him to share his creation. Christmas is not just about presents, James recited, his voice growing stronger with each line. It's about people who care when you're different. It's about hands that help you up when you fall down. It's about knowing that someone believes you can do anything, even when you don't believe it yourself. When he finished, the applause was thunderous, but more importantly, the pride and accomplishment shining in his face was unmistakable. As photographers moved discreetly through the room, capturing these genuine moments of connection and joy, it became clear that this Christmas event was achieving something extraordinary. The images being captured weren't posed royal portraits or formal ceremonial shots. They were authentic glimpses of human beings connecting across differences of age, background, and circumstance, united by a shared commitment to kindness and community. The media representatives present began to realize they were witnessing something different from the usual royal coverage. Instead of focusing on fashion choices or protocol details, they found themselves documenting stories of resilience, generosity, and hope. The narrative writing itself was not about royal duty or public relations, but about the genuine impact that caring attention and personal connection could have on individual lives. As the evening moved toward its conclusion, both sisters felt a profound shift in their understanding of their roles and their power. They had entered the ballroom carrying the weight of family tensions and public scrutiny, but they were discovering that their greatest strength lay not in managing perception, but in embracing authentic engagement with the people whose lives they had the privilege to touch. The final hour of the event would prove to be the most transformative, as spontaneous moments of joy and connection continued to unfold, creating memories that would resonate far beyond the palace walls and long after the last photographer had packed up their equipment. The evening had reached its crescendo, but rather than winding down, the energy in the ballroom seemed to intensify as unexpected moments of spontaneous connection began to unfold. What had started as a carefully orchestrated royal charity event was transforming into something resembling a genuine community celebration, where barriers of formality and social hierarchy seemed to dissolve in the warmth of shared humanity. It began when 12-year-old Amelia, who had been quietly observing the festivities from her wheelchair near the Christmas tree, started humming along to the background music. Her condition had left her unable to speak clearly, but Her love for music was unmistakable. Eugenie, who had been making her way across the room to thank the evening's volunteers, paused when she heard the beautiful melody emanating from this corner of the ballroom. "That's a lovely song," Eugenie said, kneeling beside Amelia's chair. "I don't think I recognize it. Is it one you created?" Amelia's mother, Sarah, explained that her daughter had been composing melodies in her head for years, humming them constantly, but never having the opportunity to share them with others who might appreciate their beauty. The little girl's eyes sparkled with delight as she realized someone was genuinely interested in her musical creations. Without hesitation, Eugenie called over to the evening's pianist, who had been providing soft background music throughout the dinner. "Would it be possible for you to help us figure out Amelia's melody?" she asked. "I have a feeling it might be something everyone would love to hear." The pianist, a distinguished gentleman named Professor Williams who had volunteered his services for the evening, was immediately intrigued by the challenge. What followed was a magical collaboration that drew the attention of everyone in the ballroom. Professor Williams positioned himself at the grand piano while Amelia, with her mother's help, was moved closer so she could hum her melody clearly. Slowly and patiently, the professor began to pick out the notes that corresponded to Amelia's beautiful humming. Other guests gathered around, some offering encouragement, others simply witnessing what was clearly becoming a very special moment. As the melody took shape under Professor Williams' skilled hands, its haunting beauty became apparent to everyone listening. It was a Christmas song unlike any other, filled with longing and hope, innocence and wisdom. When Amelia began to hum along with the piano accompaniment, several people in the audience felt tears forming in their eyes. Here was a child who couldn't speak in the conventional sense, but who was communicating something profound through the universal language of music. Beatrice, who had been talking with a group of volunteers on the other side of the room, was drawn by the gathering crowd and the beautiful sounds emerging from the piano. When she understood what was happening, she felt a rush of emotion that surprised her with its intensity. This was exactly the kind of moment she had hoped for when she and Eugenie had decided to approach the evening with open hearts and authentic engagement. The impromptu musical collaboration sparked something remarkable throughout the room. Other guests began to share their own talents and stories. An elderly gentleman named Arthur, who had been sitting quietly at his table, revealed that he had been a professional violinist before arthritis ended his career. When someone mentioned this to Professor Williams, he immediately invited Arthur to join the musical ensemble that was forming around Amelia's song. The sight of Arthur's weathered but still graceful hands holding a borrowed violin, playing harmony to a melody created by a 12-year-old girl who couldn't speak, created one of those transcendent moments that seemed to capture everything beautiful about human connection and creativity. The music they created together was imperfect in technical terms, but perfect in its emotional truth and spontaneous beauty. Marcus, the young man Beatrice had spoken with earlier about his engineering aspirations, surprised everyone by revealing that he played guitar and often performed at local open mic nights to earn extra money. When he was encouraged to add his voice to the growing musical celebration, his soulful interpretation of classic Christmas songs brought a contemporary energy that bridged the generational gaps in the room. As the musical collaboration continued, other forms of creative expression began to emerge. Mrs. Hartwell, the elderly widow who had spoken about her late husband, began to share some of the poetry Harold had written during their courtship. Her voice, strengthened by years of reading aloud to children at the local library, brought his romantic and hopeful words back to life, creating a connection between past and present that moved everyone who listened. Sophie, the 8-year-old who had presented the sisters with her hand-drawn Christmas card, was inspired to create an impromptu art exhibition using supplies that had been brought for a planned children's activity. Other children joined her, and soon one corner of the ballroom had been transformed into a gallery of Christmas artwork created in real time. The drawings and paintings reflected the joy and wonder these young artists were feeling in the moment, capturing images of angels, stars, Christmas trees, and smiling faces that radiated pure happiness. The evening's photographers, who had come expecting to capture standard royal event images, found themselves documenting something entirely unprecedented. The formal portraits they had planned seemed less important than the candid shots of genuine human connection and creativity. They captured Eugenie learning to play simple chords on Marcus's guitar, Beatrice helping Sophie arrange her artwork for display, and dozens of moments where age, background, and social status became irrelevant in the face of shared joy and mutual respect. As word spread through the palace staff about what was happening in the ballroom, several off-duty employees asked if they could quietly observe from the doorways. The kitchen staff, security personnel, and administrative assistants who normally remained invisible during royal events found themselves witnessing something extraordinary. Some of them had worked at the palace for decades, but had never seen anything quite like this organic celebration of human creativity and connection. The transformation of the evening was not lost on the media representatives present. Several journalists who had arrived, expecting to write predictable stories about royal obligation and public relations, found themselves crafting entirely different narratives. They were witnessing authentic leadership in action, seeing how genuine engagement and emotional intelligence could create positive change that rippled outward from individual connections to community transformation. James, the young boy who had overcome his speech challenges to recite his original poem earlier in the evening, was inspired by the creative energy around him to share more of his writing. With his speech therapist's encouragement, he read several short pieces he had been working on, each one reflecting his growing confidence and his unique perspective on the world. His words sparked conversations about resilience, creativity, and the importance of providing platforms for voices that might otherwise go unheard. The care home residents, who had initially felt somewhat isolated in the grand surroundings, found themselves at the center of attention as younger guests became fascinated by their stories and experiences. Intergenerational connections formed naturally, with teenagers asking elderly attendees about their memories of past Christmas celebrations, their advice for navigating life's challenges, and their perspectives on how the world had changed over their lifetimes. These conversations revealed remarkable parallels between different generations' experiences. Young people facing uncertain futures found wisdom and encouragement from older adults who had navigated their own periods of difficulty and change. Elderly guests, some of whom rarely had opportunities to feel valued and heard, discovered that their life experiences held valuable lessons for newer generations facing similar challenges in different contexts. The evening was becoming a masterclass in authentic community building, demonstrating how royal platforms could be used not just for charitable fundraising or public relations, but for creating genuine spaces where people from all walks of life could connect, share, and celebrate their common humanity. The sisters' decision to approach the event with openness and vulnerability rather than formal distance was proving to be transformative for everyone involved. As the clock moved toward the evening's planned conclusion, nobody seemed eager for the magic to end. The formal schedule had been completely abandoned in favor of organic conversation, creative collaboration, and spontaneous celebration. The Christmas event had evolved into something resembling a community festival, where the joy was authentic and the connections being formed were likely to last long beyond the evening itself. The final phase of the evening would bring unexpected developments that would cement this Christmas event as a turning point not just for Beatrice and Eugenie, but for everyone who had the privilege of participating in this extraordinary celebration of human creativity, resilience, and connection. As midnight approached, the ballroom had been completely transformed from a formal royal event into something resembling a magical community gathering where time seemed suspended and hearts had opened in ways no one had anticipated. The evening had taken on a life of its own, creating connections and sparking ideas that would ripple outward far beyond the palace walls. The unexpected moment that would define the entire evening came when little Amelia, whose hummed melody had sparked the musical collaboration earlier, began to show signs of fatigue. Her mother, Sarah, approached Eugenie to explain that they should probably leave soon, as the excitement and stimulation had been overwhelming for a child with Amelia's condition. But instead of simply saying goodbye, something extraordinary happened. "Before you go," Eugenie said gently, "I want to ask you something very important, Amelia. Would you like to have your beautiful song recorded properly? I know some wonderful musicians who would love to help us create a recording that could be shared with other children who might find comfort and joy in your music." The little girl's eyes widened with wonder and disbelief. No one had ever suggested that her humming could become something real, something that might bring happiness to other people. Professor Williams, who had been listening from nearby, immediately offered his studio time and expertise to make this dream a reality. "I've been recording music for over 40 years, he said, his voice warm with enthusiasm. "And I can honestly say that Amelia's melody is one of the most beautiful compositions I've ever had the privilege to help bring to life." The offer seemed to unlock something in the room, inspiring others to think about how the evening's connections could extend into lasting positive action. Marcus, the young man pursuing engineering studies, found himself in conversation with several successful business owners who were attending the event. What had started as polite small talk had evolved into serious discussions about mentorship, internship opportunities, and scholarship programs. By the end of the evening, he had received 3 concrete offers of support for his education and career goals, along with contact information for programs he had never heard of but which seemed designed specifically for someone in his situation. "I came here tonight feeling like I was on the outside looking in," Marcus confided to Beatrice during their final conversation. "I'm leaving with the feeling that I'm part of something bigger, something that wants to see me succeed." His words captured what many people in the room were experiencing: a shift from isolation to belonging, from struggle to hope, from uncertainty to possibility. Mrs. Hartwell, the elderly widow who had shared memories of her late husband Harold, found herself surrounded by new friends who were genuinely interested in staying connected with her beyond this single evening. Several of the younger attendees had asked for her contact information, expressing interest in visiting her at the care home and perhaps organizing regular intergenerational gatherings. Harold always said that the secret to a good life was surrounding yourself with people who cared about your story, she told Eugenie through tears of joy. "I thought those days were over for me, but tonight I've discovered they're just beginning again." The artistic corner that Sophie and the other children had created spontaneously had grown into something resembling a gallery exhibition. Parents and other adults were genuinely moved by the creativity and emotional honesty reflected in the young artist's work. Several pieces dealt with themes of loneliness, hope, family separation, and dreams for the future, revealing the deep emotional lives of children who are often seen only in terms of their immediate needs or circumstances. Beatrice found herself profoundly affected by one particular drawing created by a 7-year-old named Timothy, who lived with his grandmother after his parents had struggled with addiction issues. His artwork showed 2 houses, one dark and chaotic labeled before, and another bright and welcoming labeled now with Grandma. The simple but powerful imagery spoke to the resilience of children and the transformative power of stable, loving relationships. "Timothy," Beatrice said, kneeling beside the young artist, "this is one of the most powerful pieces of art I've ever seen. It tells such an important story about finding hope even when things are difficult. Would you mind if we displayed this somewhere where other children and adults could see it and maybe find inspiration in your experience?" The boy's proud nod and shy smile confirmed that being recognized for his artistic expression meant more to him than any material gift could have. As the evening drew toward its natural conclusion, both sisters realized that something fundamental had shifted in their understanding of their roles and their potential for positive impact. They had entered the ballroom carrying the weight of family tensions and public scrutiny, but they were ending the evening energized by possibilities they hadn't previously considered. The media coverage that would emerge from the event represented a dramatic departure from typical royal reporting. Instead of focusing on fashion choices, protocol details, or family drama, journalists found themselves writing about authentic human connection, creative collaboration, and the transformative power of genuine engagement. The photographs that would appear in newspapers and magazines captured real moments of joy, surprise, wonder, and mutual respect. One particular image would become iconic. A candid shot of Eugenie laughing delightedly as Amelia conducted an impromptu orchestra of volunteers using a wooden spoon as a baton, while Beatrice applauded in the background alongside children and elderly guests who were all completely absorbed in the moment's magic. The photograph captured everything beautiful about the evening's organic celebration of human creativity and connection. The event's impact extended far beyond the immediate attendees. Social media posts from guests, staff members, and media representatives began spreading stories of the evening's unexpected developments. Videos of Amelia's melody, performed by the spontaneous musical ensemble, went viral as people shared them with friends and family members who needed reminders that beauty and hope could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. The hashtag Christmas Connections Palace began trending as people shared their own stories of unexpected kindness, creative collaboration, and intergenerational friendship inspired by what they had witnessed or heard about the evening. The royal event had sparked a broader conversation about the importance of authentic community building and the power of creating spaces where people could be seen and valued for who they truly were. In the weeks following the event, concrete actions emerged from the connections that had been made. Professor Williams worked with Amelia and her mother to create a beautiful recording of her melody, which was eventually used in a documentary about the creative potential of children with communication challenges. Marcus received a full scholarship to study engineering at a prestigious university, along with internship opportunities that would help him achieve his dreams of working in renewable energy technology. Mrs. Hartwell became the centerpiece of a new intergenerational program that paired elderly care home residents with young families, creating mutually beneficial relationships that addressed isolation while providing wisdom and support across generational lines. Timothy's artwork was featured in an exhibition about children's resilience that toured schools throughout the country, helping other young people understand that difficult circumstances didn't have to define their futures. The Children's Spontaneous Art exhibition inspired the establishment of a mobile creativity program that brought art supplies and instruction to underserved communities, giving children opportunities to express themselves and process their experiences through creative exploration. Sophie became the program's first junior ambassador, helping to design activities that would engage other young artists. For Beatrice and Eugenie, the evening marked a turning point in their approach to royal duties and public engagement. They had discovered that their greatest power lay not in maintaining formal distance or managing public perception, but in showing up authentically and creating spaces where genuine human connection could flourish. The family tensions that had weighed so heavily on them before the event seemed less important in light of what they had learned about their potential for positive impact. The sisters began planning future events based on the model they had accidentally discovered. Gatherings that prioritized authentic connection over formal protocol, that celebrated creativity and individual expression, and that created opportunities for people from different backgrounds to learn from one another. Their approach to royal duty evolved from obligation to opportunity, from burden to privilege. The Christmas event that had begun with anxiety about public perception and family tensions had ended with a new understanding of what genuine leadership could look like. By choosing vulnerability over perfection, authentic engagement over formal distance, and community celebration over individual recognition, Beatrice and Eugenie had not only rehabilitated their public image, but had discovered a sustainable approach to making meaningful positive change in the world. The memories created that evening would last far longer than any newspaper headline or social media trend. Children would remember the night when adults listened carefully to their ideas and treated their creativity with respect. Elderly guests would treasure the experience of feeling valued and heard by younger generations. Young adults facing challenges would carry forward the knowledge that support and opportunity could emerge from unexpected places. As the last guest departed the palace, exchanging contact information and making plans for future meetings, it was clear that the evening had achieved something unprecedented. A royal charity event had evolved into a genuine community celebration that had changed lives, sparked creativity, and demonstrated the transformative power of authentic human connection. The Christmas magic that Beatrice and Eugenie had hoped to create had not only materialized, but had exceeded their wildest dreams, proving that sometimes the most powerful thing royals can do is simply show up as themselves and create space for others to do the same.